Hey Vista, welcome back to your City Council Tea. This is the recap for the June 9th, 2026 City Council meeting, and this meeting was only about 2 hours. So apparently miracles can happen at City Hall. And even though it was a shorter meeting, there were still a few things worth knowing if you live here, own property here, care about seniors, care about city services, or just like knowing what's happening in your own or your neighbor's backyard. If you're new here, I'm Kris Rainwaters, Vista, California's self-proclaimed village witch, and I watch these meetings, so you don't have to. I pull out all the important bits, distill them down, and serve them back to you in a much more digestible little cup of tea. And this week, because the meeting was only 2 hours, it's a very small, little dainty cup of tea, not the whole pot we've had the last couple of meetings, which feels appropriate and fancy because it was also my birthday. So I'm calling this one a birthday miracle. Here's to 43 and let's spill the tea. First sip was some super wholesome stuff. So the meeting opened with 2 proclamations. The first recognized the 5th anniversary of the Clean Energy Alliance, which is Vista's community choice energy provider. Basically, it's the local agency that gives residents and businesses another electricity option with a focus on cleaner energy and local control. Councilmember Melendez currently serves as chair of the Clean Energy Alliance board, and she talked a little bit about affordability, which obviously is the thing everyone actually cares about right now, because these utility bills have been rude. So if your SDG&E bill has been making you question your life choices, the Clean Energy Alliance does have some cost-saving programs, and Councilmember Melendez encouraged residents to reach out to their customer service team. The second proclamation was for Emiliano Eli Hernandez, who's a 5th grader at Breeze Hill Elementary. So he was selected as sheriff for a day, and this was genuinely really sweet. He wrote a whole essay about wanting to help families, kids, and older adults reduce gang and drug activity, help find missing people, and serve his community with integrity and respect. He got an official sheriff's badge, visited specialized sheriff's teams, rode in a patrol vehicle, and got recognized by the council. So congratulations to Ellie. Honestly, very adorable, very wholesome, and probably the most emotionally uncomplicated part of the evening. So next sip, and this one's a little uncomfortable. So we got into oral communication. So this is the part of the meeting where people can speak on things that are not on the agenda. And there were a few themes. So the first speaker talked about a negative past experience involving employment at the community center. Another speaker opposed the possible expansion of the Vista Detention Center and raised concerns about people being released into the surrounding neighborhood, increased utility impacts, and whether the county should be investing in housing or community resources instead of more detention beds. Mayor Franklin did clarify that the jail is actually a county facility, not a city one, so that decision would happen at the County Board of Supervisors level, not at the Vista City Council. But I do want to say thank you to her for bringing it to our awareness. Maybe we can form a coalition and travel down to the county when the appropriate meeting is happening and speak out there, because I agree with her. If you'd be interested, put it down in the comments and let's figure out a way to stop this together. Then we had a public comment opposing Pride Month and the flying of the LGBTQIA flag. And look, I'm not gonna relitigate that whole thing here, but the short version is, I guess not everyone agrees with the city's decision to recognize Pride Month or fly the Pride flag. But also just, for that person or those people, Vista has LGBTQ plus residents, family members, employees, business owners, kids, seniors, neighbors, elected officials, and people who deserve to feel like they belong in their own city, especially since they probably don't feel welcome in your home. So there is that. P.S. accomplice for life. And I know it's supposed to be ally, but I heard somebody on Instagram the other day saying he thinks the more appropriate word is accomplice. And you know what? I dig it. Then we had several public comments about cannabis, as we typically do every meeting. Speakers raised concerns about youth marijuana use, high-potency cannabis products, cannabis-related ER visits, cannabis hyperemesis syndrome, asthma, vaping, smoking, marketing, storefronts, billboards, and access. The core message was that they want the city to take cannabis-related health risks more seriously and do more public education or prevention. And I agree with that, absolutely. As a parent, I make sure my son is educated about the effects of marijuana on his developing brain, and I trust that he will make the right choice. But also as a cannabis user who also happens to have asthma, sharing a study about cannabis inhalation causing people with asthma to have more frequent asthma attacks, I mean, duh. Those of us with asthma know that already. Not sure why we even needed that study or to share that, but thanks for playing, I guess. Okay, guys, so this next sip is pure property owner business. So renters, go ahead and put your earmuffs on or scroll on Insta for a second or whatever while I glaze over this real quick. So there were 3 public hearings, and 2 of them are basically homeowner PSA territory. So the first was about delinquent mandatory trash charges. Vista has mandatory trash service for residential, commercial, and industrial properties. And if those bills go unpaid long enough, the city can eventually add those delinquent charges to the secured property tax roll. So this year there were 254 delinquent trash accounts totaling $72,628. And the largest delinquent was about like $1,200. So council approved adding those charges to the property tax rolls. The second public hearing was very similar, but for delinquent property related administrative citations. So these were things like accumulated junk, property maintenance issues, and business license violations. There were 22 delinquent accounts totaling $11,405, with the largest single citation being $415. So it adds up, right? Those also got approved to go on the property tax rolls. So here feels like a very obvious Village Witch homeowner PSA, but please don't ignore the notices from the city. I know nobody wants another official looking envelope in their life, but these things do not simply vanish into the mist. They become property tax problems. And as someone who deals with houses for a living, I promise you, we ignored the city notices is not the cute kind of plot twist. The third public hearing was the Regional Transportation Improvement Program update, also known as RTIP, because apparently bureaucracy cannot survive without acronyms. This is connected to TransNet, the county-wide half-cent sales tax that helps fund transportation projects. SANDAG requires cities to hold a public hearing and approve updates when they make certain programming changes. This item moved very quickly and with almost no discussion and passed unanimously. So the biggest sip of the night and the one worth actually thinking about here is senior services. So this was the real heart of the meeting. The city held 2 senior budget workshops earlier this year, one on March 31st and one on May 6th. The goal was to hear directly from Vista seniors about what they need, what they want prioritized, and where city services may need to grow. And the number one priority that came out of those workshops was transportation, not a vague more resources type of way or a shiny new slogan, but like actual transportation. So the seniors asked the city to look at buying an additional transit van, estimating at about $100,000, and adding part-time driver support, estimated around $45,000 per year. This would help support senior transportation programs like Out and About, which helps homebound seniors or seniors without transportation to get grocery shopping, especially in some of our food deserts, get to medical appointments and other essential trips. Staff said the program currently helps with medical appointments along the 78 corridor and grocery shoppings on specific days. And this is one of those issues that sounds kind of small until you actually think about what it means. Because if someone can't get to the doctor, can't get groceries, can't get to the senior center, or can't participate in the programs that are supposed to help them, that's not just a transportation problem. That's an isolation problem and a health problem and a quality of life problem. And Councilmember Contreras was very clear about that. She talked about hearing from seniors who feel isolated and seniors who are struggling to access basic needs. And she pushed pretty strongly for the city to take transportation seriously. But the council didn't just say, cool beans, go ahead and buy the van. The conversation was more nuanced than that. There was general agreement that senior transportation is a real need. The question was, what is the smartest way to solve it? Do we buy another city vehicle? Do we expand the current program? program? Do we look at NCTD Plus, vouchers, or subsidies? Do we compare the cost of city-run transportation against something like Lyft, which is what Mayor Franklin did for some reason? But Mayor Franklin specifically asked staff to sharpen the pencil on the cost per ride and look at whether there might be a more efficient way to get people where they need to go. Deputy Mayor O'Donnell also seems supportive of the goal, but cautious about committing to a new vehicle and ongoing costs without understanding the full long-term financial picture. Councilmember Fox brought up communication and wanted to make sure that the city is actually reaching seniors where they are, instead of just throwing information, into the void and hoping that it finds the right people. Which brings us to the second priority from the senior workshops: communication. The seniors want better communication about programs, services, events, and resources. Staff says they are working on a communications plan, including better calendars, more senior-specific outreach, and possible surveys to find out where seniors are actually getting their information. And honestly, that matters, because a program people don't know about might as well not even exist. The third priority was more staffing support for senior programs and technology help. But based on the council discussion, it sounded like transportation and communication are the two first priorities that they want to keep exploring aggressively right now. So the takeaway is Vista did not approve a new senior van that night, but council did give direction to keep digging into senior transportation and senior communication. And this will likely come back after the fiscal year closes at the end of June. And our last sip, the budget. And yes, come on, stay with me. It's just the last bit. So next up was the mid-cycle budget update. Woo, I know, so sexy. Doesn't that just sound like something you would read if you couldn't sleep and, was trying to? But it's actually really important because it tells us how the city is doing financially, what changed since the original budget was adopted, and where the pressure points are starting to show up. Vista uses a 2-year budget process, and this was basically the city checking on year 2. So the proposed amended operating budget for all funds is $187.4 million. That is an increase of about $895,000 over the original adopted budget. So for the general fund specifically, the revenue is projected at about $131.9 million, and expenses are projected at about $131.8 million. So technically, yes, the budget is balanced, barely, but not exactly frolicking through a meadow with extra money falling out of its pockets. And there were a few important changes. So first, the Wave Waterpark is being moved into the general fund. Previously, the Wave was budgeted in a separate enterprise fund, but now its revenues and expenses will be shown directly in the general fund. And the reason that matters is transparency. So if the city is already subsidizing or supporting the Wave from the general fund, then putting it directly in the general fund makes it easier to see what's actually happening. Second, fire apparatus and specialized fire safety equipment replacement funding is being moved into the fleet replacement fund. I know that sounds boring, but it makes sense because fire vehicles can take years after you order one to build and to actually receive. So this helps the city plan for those big, expensive, long-term replacements more clearly. On the revenue side, property tax is still the city's biggest and most stable source of general fund money, but sales tax is softer than it's been. The city is projecting a decrease of about $567,000 in Bradley Burns sales tax, plus another $300,000 reduction in projected Proposition L revenue. And that matters because sales tax is tied to consumer spending. So when people buy less or spend differently, or the economy gets weird, the city feels that too. There was also an increase in charges for services, but that is mostly because the Wave is being moved into the general fund, not because the city suddenly found a magical new money fountain. The budget update also included 8 personnel changes. So 2 are new positions, a communications specialist in the city manager's department, and a status assistant in information technology. The rest are reclassifications, including changing the assistant to the city manager position into a deputy city manager position. And I think that was legally mandated by California or something. It was approved unanimously, but Councilmember Contreras did raise concerns about future budget pressure, especially around public safety costs and the possibility of a major increase in the sheriff contract. And I think that's the real takeaway here. Vista is balanced right now, but there are some flashing yellow lights. Sales tax is down, public safety costs may go up, utility costs are painful. The city is trying to support services, infrastructure, seniors, public safeties, parks, transportations, and everything else without having infinite money. So this was not a dramatic budget crisis meeting, but it was definitely a keep your eyes on the numbers meeting. And the dregs at the bottom of the cup with some leaves here, your quick final notes. A few last things from council comments. Councilmember Contreras said she's continuing to push Sandag on the Inland Rail Trail, especially the segment between Civic Center Drive and North Avenue. She said the city had to give back $11.7 million back to the state because the project was not far enough along in decision to use the construction funds, which is deeply frustrating because this is one of the few major regional projects Vista actually has. She also mentioned that if the phase is too difficult to complete all at once, maybe it just needs to be broken up into smaller pieces so that something can actually start moving. She also shouted out to Guerreros and Acción por Vista Limpio, who picks up trash in Vista every Wednesday, so thank you, and mentioned the first ever movie in the park at Luz Duran Park on June 13th at 8 p.m., and the showing is Encanto. Deputy Mayor O'Donnell mentioned that the Sunset sidewalks are now in motion and said that they are looking great. Can confirmed, I was cruising down Sunset on my broom the other day and saw a woman pushing a stroller who I'm sure is super stoked for these sidewalks. And then in what I can only describe as the ceremonial closing blessing of this little birthday miracle meeting, Deputy Mayor O'Donnell wished yours truly a happy birthday from the dais.
I don't know how many people are watching on YouTube, but I know there is one person, Kris Rainwaters. Happy birthday. I know that you'll appreciate that.
And frankly, I have never felt more municipally celebrated. So thank you, Deputy Mayor. 10 out of 10, no notes. And that was your June 9th Vista City Council Tea. I asked for a birthday miracle going in, and honestly, a 2-hour meeting, a balanced budget, and a happy birthday from the dais, I'll take it. But short meeting or not, the stuff covered never really is small, is it? Senior transportation, a tightening budget, and $11.7 million that we had to hand back to the state. All worth knowing if you live here, own here, or love someone who's aging here. And if this helped you make sense of your own backyard, like, comment, subscribe, and send it to your nosy neighbor. And I'll keep watching these meetings so you don't have to. I'll see you in the next one, but hopefully sooner.